So,
Right.
But
you mentioned propaganda.
Yep.
I'm curious how you compare the propaganda tactics being used nowadays to, let's say, back in the Iraq War days, when I don't know, a lot of people who are just discovering, may not know this, but Scott was a paid commentator, I think, on 2 different networks. Is that correct? Back in
well,
the
I was paid by Fox.
day?
I was accredited to BBC. No, I was paid by NBC. I started off with NBC, then I was accredited to BBC, but didn't get a paycheck. Those darn Brits. And then Fox paid me. Yeah.
Right. So and then you're essentially blacklisted because they didn't like the truth.
They didn't like what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So how does that era compare to the current era in your mind, just in general, in terms of censorship and propaganda? Is it kind of the same thing with somewhat different tactics? Is it getting worse, or because of the internet, is it are we sort of competing with them now more because of the internet?
Well, I mean, here we'll make some news today. Okay, I'll give you some news that maybe people aren't aware of. I was involved in two instances of what we'll call black propaganda while I was a weapons inspector. And what I mean by that is, in 1997, we being the inspectors, were on our back foot. I had attempted to inspect a security facility in a presidential site in Baghdad on October 1st of 1997, and we were turned away by the Iraqis, who immediately said wonderful things about me and everything. But then they got support from the Russians and the French, and we found ourselves having to convene an emergency session of the Special Commission. We were the United Nations Special Commission, but we were separate from the Special Commission. We were the inspectors. The Special Commission was a board of a dozen or so international experts that met once a year, and they gave all the responsibility of running the inspections to the executive chairman of the Special Commission. But now the Russians and the Chinese, because this is the United Nations, said we want the Special Commission to meet and decide if Ritter is a spy, evil, doing the job, freelance, and whatever. But it was very personal. They were coming after me hard. And they're coming after the inspectors hard as well. They were trying to shut the whole thing down and say they were illegitimate. And so we had this meeting of the Special Commission, and it was just one giant exercise in propaganda. I mean, both sides. I mean, you'd see the meeting would occur, and then all of a sudden, the American representative would disappear before anything. He'd run off and get his New York Times person, and he'd spin the meeting with the American spin. And there was definitely an American spin. Then the Russian would run off and get his person, he'd spin it, and you'd have competing narratives, none of which were the truth. But the bottom line is, we inspectors were hurting. We felt we weren't getting our message out. So, ironically enough, the deputy executive chairman, a guy named Charles Dolfer, reached out to CNN. And we got a senior CNN producer and a film crew to come in. And I was instructed to work with them to release U2 imagery of select sites in Baghdad, and that would help them understand what we were trying to accomplish. And then they made me and other inspectors available for interviews. And they put together a very, very well done program that aired in March of 1998. But it was aired as a CNN documentary kind of thing. But the producers were the inspectors. We wrote the damn thing. We were shaping public opinion. Now, I call it black propaganda because we didn't admit that we were the ones doing this. We acted as if we were just being interviewed, but we were the inspectors seeking to use the media to create propaganda that would counter the propaganda coming from Iraq, France, and Russia. Nothing evil about it, but it shows you that what you're seeing on the air, generally speaking, isn't pure. It's somebody trying to get their message across through the media, and the media willfully doing this. Because if CNN was a genuine journalistic outlet, they wouldn't have run a one-sided show like that. They would have gone to the Russians, to the French, to the Iraqis, and tried to get their perspective. They didn't. They were telling from. And then I worked with the British. We at the same time period, the British MI6, they have a department in their service called information operations, and they came to me. We were receiving a lot. We being the UN, were receiving a lot of intelligence from a lot of sources, and if it was what we call actionable intelligence, meaning hard data that we could inspect on, we'd use it. But if not, it just went to our files. And the British said, "Do you have stuff in your files that you can't use, but is sexy enough that we can package it and release it to the media so that we create this notion of Iraq is cheating?" And I went, "Yeah, I got a whole bunch of that." I got permission from Richard Butler, who was the executive chairman, and I worked with MI6 for a period of months, a program called Mass Appeal. And I'd give them these files, and then we'd shape it. And then MI6 would use their connections in British media and global media to release what everybody knew was not an accurate piece of intelligence, but packaged as if it were. So it would run in newspapers to try and sway the public opinion. Again, we did this to counter what the Iraqis, French, and Russians were doing to us. But that's two pieces of my experience in
Right.
what I call
So
propaganda.
would it be safe to say that it's kind of always been this way, but maybe just some of the tactics are changing? Like, for example, the U.S. State Department is sending tweets out in Russian language, trying to win over the hearts and minds of the Russian people, which
Yeah, we have different
probably
technology today. Yeah.
yeah.
Different technology. There wasn't any Twitter back then. There wasn't. I
Yeah.
don't think there was even Facebook. There was nothing. The only thing you had were newspapers and TV. Today, the State Department can get much more personal. The State Department took up this black propaganda thing to fight ISIS under Barack Obama's regime. We were losing. We, being the United States, were losing the propaganda war to ISIS on social media. They were being very effective in getting their message out, recruiting, etc. So the State Department created a team whose sole job was to counter the ISIS. Now that team has expanded, and the CIA is deeply involved. And as I said, the CIA has been working with the Ukrainians directly. They train them, they recruit to build the Ukrainian propaganda machine. The Ukrainians have one of the most effective propaganda machines out there. I mean, you can say anything you want about them. You can hate their ideology, which I do, but they're winning the information war. There's no one out there who can say that the Russians are winning the war, but the information war is being run by Ukraine hands down. And I'm sure we'll talk about this Bucha incident, but it's 100% BS propaganda. But Ukraine has somehow convinced the world, despite everything that the evidence shows, that the Russians did this. They're war criminals. Putin, you have the president of the United States talking about Putin going to The Hague. I mean, talk about committing suicide. I dare you to try that, Biden, but I don't want you to, because the world will end. He's the damn president of Russia. He can kick your ass anytime he wants to. And you're talking about sending him to The Hague? Are you high? I mean, this is kind of insanity that goes on. They're believing their own propaganda. And to show you how stupid the president is, the same time he gives that speech, the Pentagon says, yeah, we got nothing to back up what the Ukrainians say. We're not saying they're wrong, but we got nothing that proves them right.